They used chickens in rituals, not just for food. That chicken, that everyday bird, how could it mean something sacred? No, I have to know. There's something deeper here, isn't there? Scroll through ancient records long enough and you'll find that not all wings belonged to gods in the clouds. Some scratched the earth, claws dull and voices high-pitched. But make no mistake, the chicken has walked beside humans not just on farms, but in shrines. Its blood has been spilled in silence, its feathers used to chase spirits, its bones thrown to read the future. Yet none revered the chicken quite like the Kavir, a fictional people of forested highlands near the Great Divide. Among them, the chicken, called the Kura, was not prey. It was memory, rebirth, omen, and offering. The Kavir believed that the soul entered the world through a wound in the earth, carried by wings that had once been dragons, but forgot how to fly. These wings, diminished by time and penance, became chickens, sacred exiles. And so the Kura was both a reminder and a guide, always scratching for something hidden beneath. To eat a Kura was unthinkable, unless it was the night of sorrow's end. This night, once every 7 years, marked the turning of the cycle. A passage where dreams that had died were buried properly, and new ones planted in their ashes. The ritual that unfolded was called the mourning nest. Each family would choose a single Kura, not the weakest nor the strongest, but the one who would watch the most. The bird that lingered near doorways, that stayed awake while others slept. The witness bird. From the moment of its selection, the Kura was treated like an honored guest. It was washed in crushed mint and river clay. Its legs were wrapped in dyed cords. Songs were sung in its presence, not for entertainment, but to remind it of its past life. For the Kavir believed each Kura had once been a human who carried burdens too quietly and returned in feathered form to speak through silence. 3 days before the night of sorrow's end, the family fasted. No salt, no fire, only root water and prayer. The Kura was given berries soaked in moonlight and permitted to wander the home freely. Children followed it, whispering secrets into its feathers, not because it would speak, but because it remembered. On the final night, the Kura was placed into the circle of boughs, a sacred nest-like altar constructed from the branches of the oldest tree in each family's lineage. Feathers from ancestors' birds were woven into its frame. No metal could touch the space. No voice could rise above a whisper. The head of the household, called the branch keeper, would kneel, pressing their forehead to the ground before the Kura. They would chant, "Be not food, be not flame, be the gate through which we name." And then, without violence or blade, the Kura would be soothed into sleep with incense of amber bark and pollen mist. If it closed its eyes willingly, it was a sign of acceptance. If not, the ritual was halted. No second bird was chosen. Once asleep, the Kura was laid on a pillow of ash and herb, and the dream shroud, a cloth of embroidered memories, was wrapped around it. The branch keeper would whisper the 3 sorrows of the family into its feathers. These were not confessions, they were burdens, regrets, or names of the dead that had never been properly mourned. At midnight, the circle of boughs was carried to the community pyre. No flames yet, only coals. There, each family placed their own circle, side by side, in a wheel of memory. A shared silence fell. One by one, elders recited tales of each bird, how it had once saved a child, warned of a snake, stood vigil by a sickbed. These stories wove a quilt of reverence, laid in air. Then came the Ashir, The pyre was lit not with firewood, but with regret scrawls. Pages inscribed with words never spoken, love never claimed, apologies never voiced. As they burned, their smoke drifted upward. The Cavier believed the Cura would carry the smoke on their wings to the place where broken dreams waited to be remade. No meat was eaten that night. The birds were not roasted or butchered. Their bodies, untouched by pain, were transformed into ash. That ash was later gathered and stirred into the rebirth porridge, a fermented blend of grain, wildflower honey, and memory root. Each family took a spoonful, not for taste, but for tethering, because memory, when eaten together, was less likely to be forgotten. And that, not the sacrifice, not the fire, was the point. This was not about killing a chicken. This was about mourning aloud and feeding on what silence could no longer hold. In the next block, we'll walk you through the full process, how the circle of boughs is woven, how the dream shroud is made, the meaning behind each plant used, and why the act of burning, not cooking, is the sacred end. Stay with us. To understand the full depth of the morning nest, one must begin not with the fire, but with the circle of boughs, the physical and symbolic centerpiece of the ritual. Each circle took days to craft, not for its complexity, but for its requirement. It could only be made from the branches of a tree that had known the family for at least 3 generations. Trees were marked at births, adorned during weddings, and wept beneath during funerals. Their wood held the weight of memory. The construction began at twilight, 3 days before the night of sorrow's end. The oldest branch was chosen, but it could not be cut. Instead, it had to be gifted, breaking only when it fell naturally under a whispered name. That name was always of the first ancestor, buried beneath the family's root ground. Woven into the circle were feathers from prior Cura, some held for decades. Between the woven layers were tufts of memory moss, a pale green plant that grew only in shaded groves. Said to hold dreams in its fibers, it was never picked by hand. Children carried baskets and waited for wind to dislodge it. The dream shroud was equally sacred, sewn from root fiber cloth. Each family embroidered it over the years, adding thread each time someone died, was born, or left for long journeys. No 2 shrouds were alike. Symbols stitched into its seams included spirals for griefs unspoken, waves for regrets carried too long, and birds in flight for moments of forgiveness. Before the ritual, the Cura was bathed in a mixture of mint ash, crushed marigold, and fern oil. The smell was said to draw the attention of the forgotten ones, spirits who guided the ashes of memory. During the bath, the children would sing a 4-line chant. Feather to ground, heart to wind, carry what we couldn't mend. Close your eyes, sleep unmade, be the path, not the blade. The branch keeper prepared the incense by mixing dried ambar bark with sun-crushed poppy, pollen mist from flowering reeds, and a single strand of hair from the oldest living family member. This act connected the Cura to both the past and the living present. The ash left behind after the burning was not simply gathered. It was sifted through silken screens, removing coarse fragments, and blessed with dew collected from stone altars. Each grain was treated as a vessel. The ash was stirred into the rebirth porridge, while elders whispered the names of every Cura who had come before. Ingesting the porridge was the final act. Not a meal, but a moment of transformation. Each participant was expected to name aloud one dream they had lost. The porridge, bland but warm, was meant to be swallowed slowly. Tears were not only common, they were welcomed. After the ritual, the families returned home without conversation. A second fast began. 3 days of silence. During this time, it was said that the spirits of the Kura still lingered, deciding whether to carry the grief skyward or return them. Only on the fourth morning could one speak, and when they did, it had to begin with, "I remember." These words were more than preamble. They were a contract, a promise to carry, to repeat, to not allow what was burned to vanish. Throughout the year, ashes from past mourning nests were stored in small urns kept at the family hearth. Whenever someone in the household fell ill or felt lost, a pinch of ash was placed under their pillow to remind them of where they came from and of who had once carried sorrow on their behalf. Every 50 years, a great gathering was held, where all Kavir families brought their urns to the field of rooted smoke, a circular stone plain carved with symbols of memory. There, the urns were emptied into a great spiral pit, and from the ashes grew the tree of wings, a sacred, rare tree, whose bark smelled faintly of mint, and whose leaves shimmered like feathers. Under this tree, the names of all witness birds were sung, not read, not spoken, sung. A rising chant of syllables, some too old to translate, vibrating across stone and sky. Visitors who came to observe the morning nest were never allowed to witness the ashing itself. They could hear the stories, watched the crafting, even touch the memory moss, but the fire was for the Kavir alone. If a visitor tried to watch, the ritual was cancelled. The Kura was returned to its roost, and silence held, heavier than stone. Because for the Kavi, memory was not spectacle. It was sacred erosion, a letting go that carved space for rebirth. And at the heart of that erosion was a bird who never flew, yet carried every broken thing upward.